Hello and welcome to another episode of the Why We Travel podcast. Today our journey will take us to Spain, better said to Barcelona, and we will dive into the world of food. I have Anna Mesalles with me. She is living in Barcelona, and our common hero between Anna and me is Anthony Bourdain. So we talk about food inspiration, everything that comes with traveling the world and exploring food, and specifically about Barcelona. Anna is half American, half Spanish, and grew up between both countries and finds comfort and curiosity through food, no matter how far from home she may be. Her biggest foodie inspiration, as said, is Anthony Bourdain. She loves to travel the world and explore each region's unique taste, as he did. Based in Barcelona, Anna shares her restaurant recommendations from street food to Michelin star restaurants on her blog, and we will dive into that also a little bit. So let's welcome Anna to the show. Hi, Anna, how are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited and honored and can't wait to share with you guys some tips and tricks about Barcelona.
Excellent. First question, as always, what was your first childhood memory when it came to traveling?
Well, that's a very loaded question in my life because, as you mentioned before, I kind of grew up between two countries. So every 6 months, we moved back and forth in between Spain and the US. So my first childhood memory has to be us rushing down O'Hare Airport in Chicago and try to make it home for Christmas. But for me, it's weird. Airports kind of feel very homey. I get this feeling of that all your problems kind of go away, at least not, airport problems of getting to your flight on time and this sort of thing, but everything else doesn't really matter. And I get this overwhelming feeling of, this is so comforting. And I think that is just because of the amount of time I've really spent in airports. But there's certain ones that feel more comforting than others, I would say. And so that one was one of my first core memories for travel. But second to that would have to be a trip we took to Mexico when I was about 8. And this was the first time I tried the cilantro lime combination in a taco. Because a lot of people think Spanish food is similar to Mexican food. That is not the case. I would like to advocate for that. But in this case, I had never had this sort of tangy flavor along with the cilantro, just like zest. I had never had it. And so my dad handed me a taco and said, "You try this." And this will be always engraved as a core memory for me. And I was probably about 8.
Okay, that's a great memory to start with. Now, let's talk about Barcelona. For the listeners that have not been to Barcelona, give me a bit of stats or a bit of an idea. Where is it? How big is it? And the general vibe of the city.
Yeah, so Barcelona is in Spain, if anyone's wondering, on the Iberian Peninsula. And we are located right on the Mediterranean Sea, so very close to France, Italy, Greece. It's a huge destination for cruise ships because you can just start from Barcelona and then hit up Marseille and anything really on Italy. It's very popular. It's also the #1 city for tourism, I believe. And we have our own language called Catalan, which is very similar to Spanish and French, but it also comes with its own culture. So we're very proud of that. And despite it being a very internationally friendly city, I always hear English on the streets. I think you can definitely come here without speaking any Spanish or Catalan, by the way. We also happen to have our own little culture that you have to explore once you get here because that's what really makes Barcelona so unique. And another added benefit of this city is that it has kind of a microclimate, I call it. Since we're right on the water, we have the Spanish Pyrenees 2 hours away, even an hour and a half if you have a car. And then we have wine country, another hour in the opposite direction. So you get the best of all worlds, I like to call it. And it's very mild winters and very beautiful summers, pristine beaches. So the only thing you have to really look out for is all the tourists during that season.
That sounds very good. I love Barcelona. I have been there. It's a great city. Now, obviously, you're a foodie. That's absolutely clear. What got
Yes.
you into exploring the restaurant scene of Barcelona?
Well, that's a really funny story, actually. So I was living in the US when the pandemic hit. I was doing my bachelor's in North Carolina, and I was looking for a place to do a master's program. And because of COVID and how everything landed, I thought I should probably go back home, quote unquote, to where my family is. And they don't live in Barcelona, but they live about an hour away. And there was this one program called Asade that was very high ranked for marketing. And so when I applied, I got all excited. And when I finally heard about if I got in, it was in the middle of the pandemic. So at that time, I didn't really know what was next, like most people. And I thought, well, we might as well get a master's out of these unprecedented times. And so I flew to Barcelona during that time, which most restaurants were actually closed. So what was interesting is that we had a curfew at like 10 p.m. and restaurants were closed for dinner time and breakfast. You could only go from like 2 to 4 p.m. But of course, being the foodie I was, I couldn't resist and I made it my mission to even go to restaurants. It felt more like a game, like, oh, guys, we only have 2 hours. We got to get running. And so I happened to live with two girls from my master's program that were influencers at the time. I had not done anything like this. So I thought this is quite cool. And one of them was a YouTuber, and the other one was more on TikTok and Instagram. And so I got to see a glimpse of what that kind of world and lifestyle looked like. And I remember the first time they took me out to a meal that was an invitation, and just how they just took their photos, they did their content. And that whole experience was another core more memory in my brain where I thought, this is some people do this for a living. This is so cool. And I always loved growing up watching YouTube videos and these kinds of influencers. And at the time, TikTok wasn't as popular as it was, but I had just finished my bachelor's, like I told you, and I wrote my thesis on TikTok as an app and how it was rising as a trend because of the pandemic. So I saw a huge potential market there. And in Barcelona, no one used TikTok yet. So it kind of became a weird thing that I was making these videos because no one here was on the app, but in the US it was so popular, and TikTok was still boosting it like crazy to try to get new people to join the app. So I think that really helped me in growing my following. And one day we went to dinner with my roommates, and I said, you know what? I'm going to film this restaurant that we're going to, since it's a lovely partnership and it'll give them more exposure, and we'll see if TikTok does its magic. And I just filmed it, said my honest opinion about it, explained how much each price was per person, the location, just a very visually appealing way of showing a restaurant. Of course, now looking back, I'm a bit embarrassed because my first video is very obviously my first video, and now I'm very picky with my quality. But that video blew up overnight. And it kind of hit something in me where I was like, wait, people actually like this, and this could be something I could do. And I gave myself a couple months where I posted like part 3, part 4, and I think I made it part 10. And at that point, I started to get a bit of comments from family and some classmates of mine being like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And it kind of got to me, and I thought, I have no clue why I'm doing this actually. Maybe it is a bit embarrassing. So I went to my roommates all sad and it's like, guys, this girl in our class told me this, and maybe I should be embarrassed. And I said, Anna, if we had $1 for every time someone questioned why we were doing this and made fun of us or something, we would not be in this business. We'd already be billionaires. And then I decided to take that negative feedback, you could call it, as a challenge. And say, I'm going to start my first foodie challenge where every day this month I go to a different restaurant and I rate it. So I thought, and if this doesn't work, then I can stop. But I just need to prove it to myself and to everyone if this actually works. And that's when the channel really took off. I utilized some of the restaurants I had already previously been to, and I had like the first 2 weeks covered. And then I actually started filming in daytime. And once you start something like that, word gets around, restaurants start to notice, they start inviting you. But at the same time, you start becoming more aware of the actual foodie scene in Barcelona, and your own curiosity sparks, and other people say, hey, you like food, maybe you should try this Ethiopian restaurant. And I'm like, I've never tried Ethiopian food, sounds lovely. So it kind of becomes a whole community without realizing. And long story short, after 2 years, I've been doing this now just for fun, and I've had amazing opportunities because of it. Got to meet some Michelin star chefs. I've also been on a few ads, which is cool. And I've just gotten to try so many different food curious places in Barcelona and even in Paris because I lived there for a bit because of my job. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, the channel is called Why We Travel, and I think what you have there is also a travel through a city from one place to another. So also kind of a
Correct.
journey and connecting with the hospitality business, with, as you said, with chefs, with restaurant owners. For sure, it's a very amazing environment to be in. Now, how's the feedback from your followers on your on your travels to these different restaurants? Um, what have you learned from your followers?
Yes. So what's really interesting, what I do in my videos, because I make videos in English and in Spanish, because as I mentioned before, Barcelona is such a international city, but it also has its own culture. So we have a huge expat scene that they love the English videos. It helps them be more relatable. And English, I think, is the language that I communicate myself best in. So I like to make videos in English first, and then I translate them into Spanish. And that's a great way to reach a wider audience. But at the same time, it's kind of my own niche, and no one I know does this. And that could be, a bit confusing for someone that first joins the channel. But I think a lot of people say they text me and they're like, "Hey Anna, I followed you because I want to learn Spanish," or "I followed you because I want to improve my English." And I think that's kind of like the Duolingo of TikTok in a way. And so that's a big comment I get, people wanting to learn new languages. For a while, I even did the videos in Catalan, which is our local language. And people really loved that because it was trying to preserve the natural heritage of the city, and it's kind of a dying language. So that was really exciting. But the main feedback I get on the videos is that people just want you to be honest. There's so many people out there filming recommendations and no, this is the best ramen, this is the best sushi. But who are we really to dictate that? So I've created this app on my phone where I take everyone's opinion. So I ask people on 5 criteria. I ask, what was your gut feeling about this restaurant? What's your take on the quality of the food, the price quality ratio, the service, and then the overall vibe of the restaurant? And we give it on a scale of 1 to 10, each a grade. And then I actually take the average of all of us because maybe I had the ramen, but Susie had this not so good sushi. So that could impact your experience. And so we take the collective grade of everyone and it gives you a very oddly specific decimal. So everyone always loves to comment on how random this decimal is and say, you sound like my math teacher, because I'll say at the end of the video, and I give this experience an 8.735 out of 10. Cheers, guys. And it always gives you a bit of a shock. But I think that those decimals at the end of the day, if you're a true follower, you realize what dictates a good restaurant from a great restaurant. And there's this lovely little pentagon at the end that shows you what areas the restaurant excels at and which ones it could be lacking in. So it's not just a vague review. You get more of a feeling of the place than through the video and through my commentary. So another comment that people always love to mention is they actually want to give you feedback. They want to say, oh, well, you think this place was good. You got to go try this one. And that's what I think makes community so special, in that it's there's a never ending to-do list and of places to try. And the minute you think, well, maybe I'm going to run out of restaurants, think again, because there's always a new cuisine to start, a new chef that that opened up a new place. And so I really love the community, and especially being in the foodie industry. There's some, of course, there's some hate comments like in everyone, but I never feel personally victimized by them because they're not necessarily about me unless I misspelled something or did an error. It's more about people thinking, oh, I want to try this too, because food really bonds us. And Barcelona is such a travel friendly city that it all just makes everyone more excited. So that would be the general feedback I get.
Okay, that sounds great. Now, for a first-time visitor coming to Barcelona, coming to
Mhm.
Catalonia, what would you recommend them to taste? Is there any kind of regional cuisine where you would say this is what you need to taste and to start with?
Of course. So actually, there's many dishes that are classic Barcelona dishes, and the most popular one I would say is the paella. And for those that aren't familiar what it is, it's basically a gigantic pan where you make a rice dish made with seafood. And even if you visit the city, you'll probably see it being made on some storefronts in this, but there's one place in particular that I would go to always if I have to impress someone for paella. and it's right on the Barcelona beach. It's called Sheriff. And I've been going to this restaurant since I was about 5 years old because, well, my parents were also foodies and they were trying to get me to read more in other languages, like any good parent. And they said, if you read this many minutes a month for 5 months, you'll get to pick something fun to do. And I always picked, well, I want to go eat paella at Sheriff in Barcelona since I was about 5. So this became my go-to place. And of course, it's not as cheap as others. It's about 30 euros a plate. But once you have one bite of this paella, you will understand why. You can make them of all sorts of flavors too. There's a squid ink one, which is black rice, and it leaves your teeth all black. It's just phenomenal. There's also the classic one. We call it the sea and the mountain paella with some seafood and some meat in it. You can also have a vegetarian paella, which is veggies, vegan as well. I mean, there's no dairy in it. So it's very versatile. And the dish originates from farmers in this country. When they didn't have much to eat, they would go around the farm and they're like, hey, so I got one pepper left over, a couple snails, and I think we have a bit of meat in the fridge from the other day. Let's just put it in with some rice and that's dinner. So that's how it started. And of course, paella in Spain, most people would say comes from Valencia, which is about a 2-hour drive from Barcelona. But here in Barcelona, I think we do a really good job of it too. And you can take some paella making classes. They're really fun too. And another thing you have to try, of course, I would say is the classic croquetas. So they're these little fried ball thingies, almost with a bechamel sauce, and they're very creamy. But you can fill them with anything. You can fill them with Spanish jamon, which on its own is already amazing. But you can also make them with cod. You can make them with mushrooms, with truffle, with any kind of special cheeses, spinach, whatever you want. And I think that combination is that you can just eat it with your hand and it's an explosion of flavor. So if you go to the right place for croquetas, you won't regret it.
Okay, no, that makes me hungry. Now, Barcelona, as you said, is a very touristy destination. I think it should be very easy to get there from within Europe with all the cheap airline carriers.
Yes.
And you wrote a weekend guide about Barcelona. Tell me a little
Yes,
bit
I
more
did.
about that.
So as I said, I do my content in both English and Spanish, and I made this guide in both languages that gives you kind of the perfect itinerary for a weekend in Barcelona. Because most people, when they fly in, they say I have 2 days, and that was one of my most asked questions on my DMs. And I thought, instead of constantly repeating myself, how cool would it be if you got a downloadable PDF in your email and it kind of gives you a roadmap of where to go according to location and tourist attractions that I see being the most popular. So in this weekend guide, I just ask you what language you want it in and your demographics so that it goes to your email straight away. And I'll give you brunch places, special type of food that I think you have to try once you're here, whether it be classic tapas or a sangria place or a bar at night or a cookie along the way from the cathedral to the beach that maybe you're hungry and you want to try. These little insider tips that I wish I had when I visited other cities. And it's just conveniently on a PDF, so you don't have to do much research. You just go and follow it along and put it on Google Maps. And actually, on the guide, there's photos of each destination as well. And if you click on them, it takes you straight to the review that I've made on TikTok. So you can see what you're in for ahead of time. And if you're actually, that's maybe not what I want, then you can customize it yourself. But I think it's very convenient, very easy way to travel. And in a way, I kind of map out a route around the city so that you can get the most of your time here in Barcelona in those 2 days.
Okay, where can people find the guide? Where can they download it?
This guide is in the link in my bio on Instagram, and it's on a website called www.honestaste.com, if that's easier.
Okay, I will put the links in the show notes, then you're just one click away. Before we leave, one question, Anthony Bourdain, both our hero. What's your plan there? Do you want to go the same route and extend your range going from Barcelona to other places and do the same what you do in Barcelona?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I just recently had a trip to Turkey, and this was a bit of a test for me to see how this would go. And I tried all types of Turkish foods and filmed it and just basically showed my reaction. I said, I've been looking for Turkish coffee. I've been looking for baklava. These are my favorites. And I tested out a whole new type of food and it went really well. People seem to really enjoy this kind of content. And I had the best time traveling with it. So I could definitely can plan on continuing the journey. And whenever I go on trips, maybe map out the foodie scene a bit more and share it as a regular human being. Because unlike Anthony Bourdain, I'm not a chef. I'm just a very food curious person, like most, and I want to share that experience. So for sure, I see myself going to more countries, trying out the food, and giving my own take on it. But you know, Barcelona, what I love is that in any street, you can find any cuisine in the world and then you've transported for the night to like, I don't know, Bulgaria, by just entering a certain restaurant door. So I think I can definitely do that from here as well.
Well, no, sounds great. I think we as humans connect the best over food because everyone has to eat and everyone is proud about the food they have. So that's a very good way to get in contact with other people. Anna, so much time, so much. Thanks so much for your time on the podcast today. I think it was a great insight into Barcelona and the foodie scene there. And as said, I will put the links in the show notes and people can follow you there and come and visit Barcelona. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I had a great time and I wish you all the best of luck.
Hey, Klaus here. Before you leave, I have a question. Are you a traveler? Do you have a favorite travel destination or favorite travel experiences that you would like to share with the world? Then become a guest on the Why We Travel podcast. Simply message me and I will get you all the details for becoming an interview guest, and then we take it from there. That's it for now. I see you in the next episode and have a great day.